Americans are afraid to fly. And of those who do fly, about 1 in 6 fly with feelings ranging from just being uncomfortable to complete open terror. About 100 people are here today. They're going to fly to Detroit. They think they've overcome their fear of flying. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because this story really started about 2 weeks ago in a downtown Washington hotel.
I'm a fearful flyer. One more time. I'm a fearful flyer. That's good. How about clapping for that?
That's Slim Cummings at the podium, retired Pan Am pilot, and now shepherd of this flock of people who are afraid to fly. The group includes housewives, engineers, a White House aide, the wife of the Reynolds tobacco heir, and a Hollywood film executive. 100 people with 100 different reasons for their fear. Marilyn Funkhauser was a stewardess for United 10 years ago. Her fear began just before she quit.
And I started to develop a fear in my last month, like I said, but I think when I got married, it added to it. I think that being nervous getting married, I don't know if it was just what the reason was, I'm not sure. But I did develop it then. I had a child 2 years later, and my fear grew. It got worse, yeah.
Marilyn has flown only twice in the past 9 years, and even then she says it took a few drinks for her to relax. Mary Schwing has flown as recently as a year and a half ago, but it wasn't much fun for this Baltimore housewife.
I'm always afraid the plane's going to crash, and I'm always worried about what I'm going to do, what's going to happen to my children.
Is your fear, do you have a fear of dying as well? Is that part of it?
I don't have any fear of dying unless it's, you know, thinking about a plane. Plane and dying to me is the same thing.
Marilyn and Mary and the other fearful flyers paid $150 for this 2-week seminar. They say it's a lot cheaper than seeing a psychiatrist at $50 an hour. One of the first things they learn here is how to relax.
And take the second deep breath and make it a little bit deeper than the first. And hold it for 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and now exhale and let go even more and relax.
In fact, we've been asked to begin these exercises before the course began. Cummings borrowed the technique from such Eastern teachings as transcendental meditation.
Our breathing is exactly related to our mental state. And if you change the breathing, you can somewhat change your mental state.
Relaxing is just the first step in conquering the clouds. Learning how planes fly is the second. Tomorrow we climb aboard a DC-10 to get the feel of an aircraft. I'm Frances Harden on the scene with the Fearful Flyers. This is what we're all afraid of, and it's just as intimidating on the ground as in the air, maybe more so, because this is a DC-10. But Slim Cummings does not believe familiarity breeds contempt. Instead, the former Pan Am pilot believes knowing the thing you fear will set you free from your phobia.
My techniques were based on that familiarity with the creature that they're afraid of, removing the unknown, and all in a supportive setting like we have inside, 100 people pulling for one another.
Then Cummings took the wheel while he explained what goes on in the cockpit. A United stewardess was there also to show off the superjet. And a former stewardess who turned into a fearful flyer checked some of the new developments since she flew 10 years ago. That's Marilyn Funkhauser stepping out of an elevator from the downstairs galley. But the person who probably got the most attention was the mechanic. He explained over and over the maintenance procedures on the DC-10 engines. Mary and Fred Schwing, who are from Baltimore, were listening carefully. Mary's trying to conquer her fears so she can fly without getting migraine headaches. Our next stop, the Regional Air Traffic Control Center in Leesburg, Virginia.
Jetstar 257 Hotel, contact Jacksonville Center 135.05.
35057 Hotel, swell.
For a lot of us, it was comforting to learn that we're never alone in the air, that someone on the ground is tracking flights from point to point. Later, Greg Joseph said the visit went a long way in helping him conquer the clouds.
I think I've answered a lot of, or had a lot of the questions answered that have been on my mind. And I think, of course, the big test will be just getting in the plane and seeing how I feel and how I react to the actual situation.
Still, the graduation flight was coming closer, and many fearful flyers were wondering if they would come through it with flying colors. Frances Harden on the news scene with the fearful flyers.
But at the bottom of a phobia of flying is really the fear of, will I die on this airplane?
This is Dr. Diana Ronell, psychologist, phobia specialist, and co-pilot with Captain Slim Cummings for the fearful flyers. She says death is something we have to learn to live with.
It's the one certainty, is that we are going to die. But the question of will it happen in an airplane is highly unlikely.
Phobias are unnatural, exaggerated fears. They can cause minor inconveniences, or they can cause serious mental illness. But in any case, Ronell says there is something special about the fear of flying.
You can talk about flying as being a symbol for power, for growth, for freedom, omnipotence, also the fear of failure, the fear of falling. You know, if I fly too high, what will happen to me?
This was the last day before what you could call our test flight to Detroit. Slim brought back one of the faithful from a previous class. It's a little like a revival, but it is comforting when Kate Lair admits she's still a little afraid to fly. But she has certain routines she follows that help.
I always interview the cockpit, and always, and how long have you been flying?
Kate Lair doesn't care if the pilots think she's odd. The point is, it works.
One time, the plane didn't take off as it was supposed to because something had to be fixed, and somebody came back and said, well, the captain wants you to come back up and he'll explain what's wrong with the plane.
The mood is high, excitement, nervousness, some bravado, but most of us are ready.
I am nervous slightly, but I'm not sick this week, and normally before a flight I would be sick.
No migraines.
No migraines.
I am looking forward to Saturday. Yes, I do have some anxiety. I get butterflies in my stomach. I am nervous, but I really am looking forward to it. I hope that I am going to accomplish this and get rid of my fears.
I'm Frances Harden on the news scene with the fearful flyers. This is it. We're at Dulles and we're leaving for Detroit. You could call it D-Day. All but two of us made it here to the airport. Each one of us has been afraid to fly, some irrationally so. But George Spencer's fear was based on experience.
I was on the plane that went down over Elkton, Maryland in 1963. I got off it before it went down. And I was on another plane that crashed too, and not at the time that it crashed. And I can tell all those people that. I can't tell the people in the group that. And,
So you feel you've had your close calls?
Yeah, and then I was in some thunderstorms, struck by lightning, and I had a bad time of it.
Ann Schildkraut is thrilled about this flight. She's come a long way since 1953 when she became hysterical during a landing.
I looked out the window while the plane was circling to land, and however, we couldn't land due to fog. So after about an hour and a half, we did land, and as the plane was landing, I looked out the window and saw flames coming out of the engine. I believe they call it a turbojet or something, and I tore the belt off my body, and I jumped up. The stewardess was about 6 foot tall, and I just jumped up as high as I can, and I punched her, you know, and so...
She was trying to hold you back.
Right, she was trying to hold me back.
That's George Glassman picking up his first airline tickets in 25 years. Like a lot of us, he'd stopped flying after an important event in his life.
Well, I got married, and the last time I flew was on my honeymoon, which was 25 years ago, and I just decided then I wasn't going to fly anymore.
Is this like a second honeymoon now?
Well, to a degree. We're only going to go to Detroit, but this is the beginning anyway.
The 747 is waiting, and we climb aboard. But for two people, it was too much. This woman walked off and back into the mobile lounge. Captain Cummings goes after her, but it's no use. Takeoff is tense, but we're breathing deeply and wiggling our toes to stay relaxed. And we're off. There are plenty of hugs, kisses, congratulations to go around, and champagne to oil the good feeling.
I feel good. I feel better. I have to honestly admit I was kind of anxious and a little bit nervous coming up on takeoff, Landings I love because I'm almost down on the ground, but I really do feel good.
I still feel a little bit nervous, but I'm making it. I'm doing it.
In Detroit, there are more hugs and kisses, and diplomas are passed out. Ann Schildkraut gets a framed copy of the poem High Flight. That's for coming through with flying colors. And there's even a diploma for me. A member of a previous class has the last word before we take off again. Well, I have wiggled my toes and I've breathed deeply, and now I'm flying high. I'm Frances Harden on the news scene, somewhere over the East Coast.
Come fly with me, let's fly away.
If you're a white-knuckle flyer, frightened of the fact or even the idea of going from here to there in an airplane, your misery has plenty of company. The number of people who have a fear of flying is believed to be in the millions. David Culhane talked with a few of them this week and found an answer for some of them.
I hate to say it, but it feels like you're in a coffin and they just shut the top of it, you know, and that's it. There's no way of getting out.
About 5 days before I get diarrhea, I have a terrible problem. And then I would say the morning of the flight, I can't eat. Underlying the whole thing, I'm finding out, is a fear of dying.
I never fly. I never did. Just to develop this fear in my mind since I was maybe 14 or 15 years of age.
So you've never yet been on an airplane?
I never have been on a plane, no, sir.
They are talking about the fear of flying. Not just a dull ache, but the kind of paralysis of fright that may mean you refuse to fly at all. But for the nominal fee of $100, you can take a 7-session seminar that is almost guaranteed to let you soar into the air. If not happily, at least without getting sick to your stomach. The course is run by Captain Truman W. Slim Cummings, a veteran Pan American Airlines pilot who is also something of a psychologist.
We're reaching you at a deeper level. Your fear isn't at an intellectual level. It's at an emotional level, and that's the subconscious mind.
All kinds of people come to his seminars in cities around the country. They tend to be college graduates in their late 30s, and there are usually more women than men. Most have flown before. Less than 5% have never flown in a commercial jet. What makes them different is that they are frightened silly by even the thought of taking off in an airplane.
Anxiety begins as soon as I know I'm going. It becomes more real when the tickets are purchased, and it becomes more vivid on the way to the airport, boarding, and the worst part for me is the revving of the engines when we're taking off. Then my stomach is tight. I feel terrified.
One of the first things Captain Cummings teaches, in class and with a tape cassette the students can take home, is how to relax, breathing techniques to ease runaway terror.
We're going to do the 3 deep breaths again, and you'll find that you'll feel even more relaxed this time than you were before, because this is a learning process, this is a letting go.
Then there are visits to air control centers that track planes across the country, and a reassuring trip to the control tower to see another view of the airport's operation.
The pilot might see something dangerous and the control tower will say it isn't. Then don't they argue between...
There's no arguments.
Well, no.
There's not time for arguments.
No, not then, but now. Who's got the final say? The pilot or the pilot or control?
Well,
I mean, I do hear this on television.
The fearful flyers see an airplane cockpit and then sit in a real jet as it rushes down the runway toward takeoff. Only this time, it doesn't take off. Just a little practice run.
With George Brooks,
and they even get a look at somebody who has the opposite sickness. This guy is crazy about flying.
And in 21 days in the United States, I flew 184 flights, covering close to 60,000 miles. I flew more than the unions would permit an airline employee to fly. And it was pretty bizarre. I would arrive at Denver and ask if there were any seats on the flight to Seattle. And if the girl said no, I'd say, well, how about the flight to Miami?
Most of his students think Slim Cummings is terrific, a kind of father image. Even those who think he is a bit corny agree that his methods work.
That's a compliment to me that is corny. That's fine. There's a lot of evangelism that goes in this. I accept that.
So the classes and briefings are over. The soul searching is finished about the whys and wherefores of this phobia against flying. Now the question is, Will these fearful flyers get on this airplane for their graduation flight?
Out of a class of 65, only one failed to show up. Slim has a success rate of about 95%. Each person is allowed to bring a friend, something like a human security blanket. And were they nervous? You bet your life they were. And now the takeoff. They made it. They were so excited that they spent most of the hour-long flight standing in the aisle drinking champagne.
So, you've never flown before. Tell me what it feels like.
Oh, feels beautiful right now. Wonderful. I think I'm going to take a plane maybe tomorrow. Go over to Boston or somewhere for lunch or dinner, whatever it is. I really mean. My fear is over. It looks like my life has started all over again for me.
David Culhane, CBS News, with the former fearful flyers over New York.
That's the news. I'm Bob Schieffer, CBS News, New York.
An estimated 25 million people in this country are afraid to fly. Those afflicted with aerophobia are terrified of crashing, being enclosed, or losing control of themselves. This is a story of how a few of those fearful flyers took some steps towards conquering their phobia. First, their description of what it's like to fly.
Sometimes I just feel like I cannot walk down that ramp. The heart starts beating, palms start sweating. I really didn't think it gets worse every time you get on a plane. I didn't think I would get on another one. I went to Europe this summer and I said, that is it. And if I finally did get on board the plane, on the takeoff, I just knew that was it. I'd either get a nosebleed or I'd cry, or I'd do a lot of praying. And I would just hold on the whole way. I personally would keep the plane up in the air through the sheer willpower.
Just pure panic. Starting maybe a month before finding out I had to take a flight, and just gradually working up to a point where the flights that I did make, I was just a basket case almost, and then I got to the point of avoidance where I'd start looking for excuses not to go on the trip.
I've always been just super nervous about it, and I knew rationally that it was the safest way to go. If I was going to go from here to Nashville, Tennessee, my likelihood of getting there would be greater on a plane than in a car. But nevertheless, I was really very nervous about it and could not be comfortable at all. And then once I got there, I couldn't enjoy myself for having to worry about flying back.
Perhaps the most unusual case we encountered was that of SMU law professor Beverly Carl. She had been flying comfortably for 20 years.
And about 2 or 3 years ago, the flying phobia hit. I have continued to fly, but in the last 2 or 3 years, I've done extensive flying: India, China, Indonesia, Australia, Alaska, Mexico. All that's within the last year or two. White-knuckled, just suffering each flight. What happens, we don't know. And at this point, I don't really care. I agree with the people who conduct this seminar. I don't really care what's behind it. All I want to do is get over it and learn to fly comfortably again.
Now this, I don't even know the horsepower of these engines. In 33 years of airline flying, I only had 2 engine failures, and both were handled routinely.
Completing our cast of characters are Captain Slim Cummings and psychologist Diana Ronell. They are the people who conduct the Fear of Flying seminars, classes that are 95% successful. Their basic philosophy is to relax and educate the aerophobic. A series of relaxation exercises is taught, and several hours are spent acquainting class members with the operations of a jet aircraft.
There's some doors here that open up. After takeoff, these doors open up and this landing gear retracts into the belly. And that's what has alarmed some of you, the sound of that hydraulic process.
Basically what's happened is that some kind of negative association has been paired with flying. That there's some anxiety. For example, I get on a flight and I'm not frightened about flying, However, my father, let's say, is dying in Detroit, and I have to fly to Detroit. On the aircraft, you know, I'm unaware of it. There's a tremendous amount of stress and anxiety in me, and I take an airplane ride. I've never been afraid of flying. When I come back, all of a sudden, I'm very anxious.
Half of the people in the class have been flying, but they've been doing it miserably, holding on, some of them drunk, people even who don't drink. The other half have stopped flying because of their fear.
But today, these people will take their graduation flight, a chartered trip to Oklahoma City and back.
Today, they're going to confront their fear. They've been bullied by it, abused, taunted by it, haunted by it. Their fear has put them down. They've had people say to them, there's nothing to be afraid of. What's wrong with you? You know, and that's a tremendous put down. Today, they're going to confront that ghost.
And so, with the support of their classmates, this determined group of people settled in to conquer their fear.
Okay, we're off the ground now. And now the landing gear is going to come up.
And so, after hours of training and talking, everyone made it aloft. No miracle cures, but everybody felt pretty good.
How do you feel right now?
I feel good. I'm going to Europe this summer.
This great big guy had to cry. That's what he had to do.
Thank you. She made me get on. She's the one who did it.
Oh, I'm still kind of nervous, but I felt like crying, but I didn't. So I'm looking out the window a little every once in a while, and it's helping me. Slim telling us what's going on. Like now, they're pulling back on the engines, and we're only going to land in about 10 minutes, and I'm looking forward to that.
I'm shaky. I don't know if it's because I made it or I'm shaky, but I'm all right.
And after an uneventful landing in Oklahoma City, it was back in the air for a return flight to Dallas. Only this time, there was cause for celebration. Champagne for some very brave folks.
I'm already fantasizing about, I'm going to go to Antarctica, and I'm going to go to all those exotic, fun places I want to see.
I'm gonna try another flight. I'm gonna take another flight. I'm gonna try to run down to Houston in a couple weeks, and just got to keep at it. Just got to keep doing it.
You think your life's going to change now?
Absolutely, no question about it.
20 minutes later, everyone was back on the ground and ready to celebrate their graduation. It was a moment of triumph.
We did it.
It's 6:20 on Thursday, January the 24th. Tonight we'll be looking at the nuclear weapons debate going on at the moment in the House of Commons. Do we need a replacement for Polaris? We'll also be sampling some of the frontrunners in the British Rock and Pop Awards for 1979. But we start with flying. Well, this morning I flew down from the northeast after last night's special edition of the programme from Newcastle. The flight was smooth and easy, and anyway, flying doesn't particularly worry me. But for thousands of people, flying can be a terrifying experience. Some people, even though their job perhaps requires that they should take the odd plane trip, just can't bring themselves to do it. Well, last weekend, for the first time in Britain, the American airline Pan Am started a course costing £100 to try to cure people of their fear of flying.
With the power of your creative imagination, I want you to visualize yourself on a beautiful, quiet, secluded beach. There is a warming sun overhead and a gentle breeze that carries a bracing smell of salt air. You are alone, contentedly stretched out on a large, soft towel on the white sand. Inhale slowly and deeply. Hold that inhalation now as I count. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Now exhale. Let go. Relax.
I've always found it difficult to believe that aircraft actually can fly, to have faith in whatever it is that's meant to be holding them up. My logic in the face of all reasonable arguments simply says they should come down. Add to that those grisly details of the crashes we simply have to read about, and you've got a fear of flying. Now for me, my anxiety, I prefer to call it, is just a little inconvenience. I have to fly, very often in fact. Sometimes I'm a little uncomfortable, though sometimes very tense. But for millions of other people, it's more than just that little inconvenience. And they're aerophobics. Flying is 25 times safer per mile than driving, and you have a 99.999% chance of arriving by plane. Statistics that mean nothing to another statistic, the 30 million people that worldwide fear flying.
For some people, it's just the fear of, I'm going to panic.
Fear of fear itself?
Yeah, fear of fear itself. Very common statement amongst our participants.
And is that one an easy one for you to help?
In some ways, strangely enough, by sometimes just telling people, accept the fact that you're afraid, and it's all right, is sufficient to permit people not to feel that kind of anxiety.
Until recently, there wasn't much organised for the confirmed aerophobic. But last weekend, smiling through their nerves and gritted teeth, 21 passengers were checking in, taking comfort from each other and from the surprising fact that they'd got this far. For the last 2 weeks, they'd given up most evenings for the first Fearful Flyers seminar held in Britain.
The track record is very impressive.
What sort of figures?
Over 90%.
Alan Kaufman is the undiluted 100% real thing. Marketing director, living 11 miles from Heathrow, his fear is beginning to hold him back at work, because not even once in his whole life has Alan Kaufman been able to fly.
I mean, most people, the thought of going to, say, Bangkok or Miami on a promotional trip, which is absolute pleasure, 5-star hotel, all expenses paid, I mean, most people give their right arm for that. I get up to within, 2 weeks of, I say I'm going to go, and I get up to about 2 weeks, and then I have to sort of go up to the sales director and say, I'm sorry, Tom, I just can't make it.
Have you felt stupid doing that?
Sure, yeah.
The course is really very simple. Encounter groups, deep breathing, technical information, even wiggling hands and toes, but in particular using group therapy to desensitize. For instance, the strength of caring companionship easing the most fearful on a tour of the airport. The simple idea that if you hold hands and comfort each other, the aircraft don't seem so fearful.
We'll go over here and look closer at the landing gear.
American techniques, leading in aviation itself, also lead in aviation neurosis therapy. Aircraft wings can safely bend up and down. Engines on fire have their own extinguishers. Tires can burst and still survive. The information is screened to reassure.
We do have the flight plan for each flight in this office. It's a bit of paper like this, and with this we can tell whereabouts each aircraft should be at any time.
The encounter group stability remains intact.
Now the airplane's not ready for takeoff actually, so notice the horn we get when we bring these throttles up. You see, the airplane's not prepared for takeoff. That horn tells us that. On the D707 you get a loud bell. On this airplane you get something.
With a week to go, they leave for home, trying not to think of the real test on Saturday.
I've got to this stage where if this fails on Saturday, I'm only saying if, and somebody ridiculed me, I think I would absolutely go berserk. I think I would punch them on the nose for the effort and pain that this has caused me in this fortnight to get on that aircraft.
It's been that painful?
Oh, yeah.
Would it be one of the happiest days of your life if you succeed on Saturday?
You film me on Saturday, coming down that ramp, and yeah, it would be like somebody winning the World Cup or whatever, yeah. It really will be that great, sure.
You won't panic, won't scream, won't get hysterical, will be able to breathe. Every participant has a cassette, and for the last few days they're virtually ordered to listen to it constantly, accept, confront, and then finally understand their fear. On Saturday morning, the question was who would and who would not turn up. In the event, all 21 did, even Alan Kaufman, nervously contemplating his first flight. The course originator, Captain Slim Cummings, was watching him carefully.
And the one fellow who's having a problem,
that's Alan.
Others, yes, others are going by and they're just, you know, I said you don't have to say anything. Just put your hand on his shoulder. So he needs the strength from the group. He needs to share it.
With Alan, do you think he will be all right?
Yes, I do.
You're not certain though, are you?
Well, no, I'm not 100% because between a yes and a no, between going and not going often is a very, very thin line.
You turn around and say the same thing to the group. Okay. For the next 50 minutes, Captain Cummings led and patrolled like a true shepherd. The Pan Am assistants like sheepdogs, keeping the flock together.
Toward the departure lounge. Okay.
The announcements, the carpets, the uniforms, walkie-talkies, duty-free, security. So much threatening strangeness. Only the other 20 people on the course were familiar. Every footstep takes them closer. On the walkway, the first glimpse of the aircraft. Alan Kaufman had been cuddled through customs and finally touched, stroked and blinkered to the edge of Gate 29.
I'd given up last night. I wasn't coming. And I'd shut off and I laid in bed trying to shut all these people, this fortnight out of my mind. Got up, made myself some coffee, but couldn't get this feeling from within myself, letting myself down, more than anything else, and then letting these people down. And this morning I got up, and I still wasn't going, and my wife had got everything ready, and she said, the Navy's coming for you at 7, come on, get ready, you're going. And I've just gone along, Bernard, you know.
You're in a bit of a daze, are you?
Sure, yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous are you at the moment?
Scale of 1 to 10, probably now about 7.
7, so you're on your way down? Well, this is Gate 29. You've made it this far.
Yeah.
You're going to make it, aren't you?
Yeah, I am, Bernard, yeah.
Well, let's
Got to make it.
It all becomes irrelevant as the procedure crowds in and time funnels towards one point. A moment already lived 1,000 times in the mind becomes unremarkable reality. The first major crisis is over. The whole group has held together and is now aboard.
2 up there. There you go.
You're all holding hands. Does that
help? Yeah. You feel the warmth, you feel the comfort. And you know you are not on your own. Everybody else is afraid. So.
You're almost there, aren't you? You've almost made it.
The last hurdle.
Wave your hand.
The last hurdle.
Does that help?
Like artificial laughter, the relaxation exercises cover unwelcome truth. With the closing of the door, there's no turning back. The Clipper class cabin becomes an orgy of cuddling and touching as time once again funnels towards that ultimate test at takeoff.
On the 747, there are 10 exit doors, 5 on the left side and 5 on the right side.
One deep breath. Take one real deep breath. We're up. We're up. Listen to the sound of the gear as it comes up now. Listen for the landing gear to come up. Celebrate that.
I think it's I've never flown without drugs, and it's the most... I couldn't believe that I've been so silly for 20-odd years. It's fantastic. We've got up here and there's nothing to it. It's nothing, actually. Oh, John. Oh, John, it's
super, isn't it?
Oh.
You've made it now, haven't you?
Yeah, I just didn't know what I was worried about, really. All right, I still feel shaky, slightly apprehensive, but I wasn't anticipating anything like that.
1, 2, 3, cheers. Ready? 1,
Cheers! Sugary as it seems, from that point on, much of the group then simply sat back and enjoyed themselves, almost incredulous of their earlier fears. And all 21 would forever show unwavering preference towards the airline that first got them off the ground. The graduation ceremony was like Happy Days with all the bad bits cut out. a room full of people, 100 years younger, led by Slim Cummings, the Billy Graham of beating aerophobia.
You can think this is true.
Yeah.
Alan Kaufman. Go get the world.
Thanks very much, Jay. Very proud moment, yes. Joe.
Okay, my friend.
I don't think I've ever felt so wonderful in my life. This is the first time I've ever been abroad in my life. But it's more than that. I think it's to share what we've all experienced. We haven't just experienced a one-day flight, we've experienced a fortnight's flight. And we've all come through in our ups and downs, one step at a time. And here we all are tonight, and we're going to go back tomorrow. And Slim, I can't thank you enough, all of you.
Next morning, the hangovers were forgotten as the group flew back home. Much less dramatic, nearly everyone sat back casually, searching more inside themselves for help than to the group. Within the next few weeks, they're expected to fly on their own, and at least once more in a year. By that time, their fear of flying should just be a minor inconvenience.
Fear of flying, I'm afraid of dying, but I still get along with you. Still get along with you, 'cause I need to